So let's see if I can get started here. It looks like we're live there, which is great. All right. All right, Shawn. Well, glad you're here, man. I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
everything else. So let's go ahead and get started with the recording, which we're going to do, and then I'm going to go ahead and.
Recording in progress.
Awesome. So really glad you're here with us. Whoops, just lost you there. That's okay. Really glad you're here with us today. So I'm joined by Shawn Rhodes from Bulletproof Selling. This is our cohort. There are many like it, but this one is mine. So the old Marine rifle creed turned into a sales training tool. So, but glad you're here. So Shawn and I met each other. Gosh, who introduced us? Was it Otis? Who introduced us?
Sure. I
Sure.
don't know.
Maybe it was Otis McGregor. Maybe it was who knows who, how we got invited or how we met each other. I might have just reached out to you because I liked your content. But as we started to get to know each other, as we started to interview, as we started spending time together, I realized we had a lot in common. Similar shared background in the Marine Corps, similar paths as we left active duty and went into the civilian world. We went different paths. He went much more entrepreneur path, but what in and my went much more corporate path. But then we ended up crossing over many times, and it brought us to a couple of weeks ago. And so Shawn was kind enough to have me join his show, Bulletproof Selling, which is much further along than Sales Platoon, and is available on iTunes. I owe you a review, my friend. It is an excellent podcast, but
Thanks.
um, just want to turn it over to you. So, as Sales Platoon, we're a cohort of active duty military that's learning how to make the transition off of active duty and go into the corporate world. One of the roles that they're looking at, and the primary role they're exploring as they're part of our cohort, is going into this somewhat complex field of revenue operations. And what does that really mean? And we're really talking about sales. And a friend of mine, Steve Fretzen, he says, sales is not a dirty word. The entire world actually rests upon the transaction of goods and services. And so we, most of the time, thinking about sales, and when we think about it, we're thinking about the people that we were warned against on active duty as young enlisted. Don't buy the camera with unlimited film, or the person that annoys you at the family reunion that wants to turn you on to residual income, or the insurance salesman who wants to talk to you. But it's really much more complex than that. And so Shawn, I was hoping you would just join today, share a little about your story, your background, how you came to start your company now, and then I'll guide us with a series of questions. But really, just a conversation. They're always interested in hearing from people that aren't me. So you definitely
Absolutely. Yeah, because they probably hear enough from you.
more than enough. Yeah.
Yeah, so the only experience I really had with salespeople in the military and prior to getting out, and I'll give everybody my little brief life story here in a second. And y'all have probably had people do this if you're coming out of the military, where there's that like common area in the barracks, and there's always somebody in there trying to pitch you on something. Be part of some kind of MLM. It happened to me all the time, and it was funny to see all the NJPs come out because, of course, it's illegal, but it didn't stop dudes from doing it, and gals for that matter. So yeah, that was my only experience with sales, and I didn't realize the necessity of sales until it was up to me to keep the lights on in my house and to make sure that my wife and little girl didn't starve to death. Because in the military, I got that check every month, and even though that 19% APR Mustang looks really sexy in the driveway, you still got to have cash to do something with. So that's kind of what led me into this field. But I'll back up a minute because Raleigh did mention we got some things in common. So I was probably 18 years old in the Marine Corps, and this was back in 2001. Some of you all might not have been born yet. Maybe you're really young, but in 2001, that's when I was at Paris Island. Was there when the Twin Towers were hit, and I had a job of being a war correspondent, like Joker in Full Metal Jacket, if y'all ever saw that movie. And it was a really fun gig. I thought I was going to have a great time. And then our drill instructors were like, "Hey, y'all are going on the war, so if you join for college, y'all done messed up." And that was the truth. So got out of Paris Island. Spent about 9 months at my MOS school. They, for some reason, decided I was not ready for the Fleet Marine Force, so they just kept giving me more training. Ended up being a really good thing because I learned how to do all of the things that I do today, which is professionally communicate, edit video, broadcasting, radio broadcasting, all of the things that I do now. And of course, speaking is a big part of my business as well. So as a war correspondent, they sent me out to the initial invasion of Iraq in 2003. I pushed forward with Task Force Tarawa up through Kuwait and all the way up to a little place called Diwania. And then they sent me back in 2004 for a lovely little trip to this place called the Sunni Triangle, where I just kept covering troops from Fallujah, Ramadi, and Baghdad, all in that area. That was 2004. Now, I was the guy that the career planners tell stories about. And what I mean by that is that I knew I was not going to be re-enlisted in the Marine Corps because I knew they were going to send my butt to Afghanistan, and I had no desire. And I'm sure we got some Afghanistan veterans on the call today. God bless every one of you, because I had no desire to climb mountains for a living. So while I was in Iraq, I was submitting college applications, making sure that everybody had my paperwork, that I was getting my GI Bill set up as much as I could, knowing I was getting out in probably about a year. And I remember, 3 a.m. Iraq time, because there's a big time difference between the Middle East and the States. I'm on a call with, the admissions office of all these universities, and they're like, Shawn, why is it so loud there? Your connection is horrible. Are you on a cell phone? I was like, no, we're just getting incoming right now. Hold on, I gotta get my flak jacket on and chamber around. And they thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if it helped me get into those schools or not, but ended up getting out of the Marine Corps, getting into university, and I was probably less than 8 or 9 months removed from combat when I dropped myself into a university classroom, and this was in 2005, and surrounded by 18-year-olds. So I was 22, had been to 24 countries, multiple tours, and these kids had only really ever seen their hometowns. So it was kind of a culture shock for me, even being in university around people almost my own age, but still separated by this massive world of difference. And my plan at that point, because I was really interested in security and I thought the military was pretty secure except for the whole getting shot at part. So I was going to be a high school history teacher. And I got out of school certified in that and realized that they were going to pay me $35,000 a year to work about 80 hours a week. And I realized that was not going to really meet my life goals. So I ended up using my veterans preference to get a job at the National Park Service. I was a National Park Ranger for a little while, big hat, chasing bears around, that kind of thing. And then started thinking to myself, I need to get back in the military because I did not really gel with a lot of civilians, even in the government, even as a GS, civil service employee. And so there was a job down here in Tampa, Florida, being a public affairs person for one of the reserve air wings. And I took that gig that got me down to Tampa, started working in MacDill Air Force Base, which some of y'all might have traveled through at some point. And in 2012, I want to say, Congress, just like they're about to do now, couldn't figure out what color the sky was. They couldn't agree on it. And when that happens, they can't figure out what color the sky is. They send all the civilian employees home. They shut the government down, essentially. And they told me, we don't know when you're going to be coming back, but you're not going to be getting paid while we're sending you home. And I thought the most secure job in the world suddenly was not that secure, because I don't trust Republicans and Democrats to agree on anything, really. And so at that point, 2012, had just gotten married, realized, man, I want to do something with my life that's different from what I'm doing now. I still love to communicate, still love to get out there and help people, but it wasn't going to do it in a way that was limited by a salary. And so there was no better time for me to do it. I punched out, formed my own business, and I tried to do everything at once and failed miserably at all of it. And when I say everything at once, I mean I tried to be a speaker, author, business consultant, life coach, online course content creator, podcast director. There were probably some other job titles in there that I was also failing at. So fast forward about a year or two, I'd liquidated my thrift savings plan, liquidated my retirement account to give me some kind of operating capital to run this entrepreneurial venture with, and was burning through cash. Bills were due every month, but when I would be able to make a sale, I had
And the other thing I want to do is I want to try to get it so that it's not focused on the whole group, but also just on the speaker. So if you can change it from gallery to speaker, that would be great. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. So, a lot of good background, a lot of good things there. I'm still not seeing you as the primary person on the screen, so I may just end up stopping this live cam. They definitely don't want to see me alone. But no, so if you can, that would be good. That you can go. There you go. And then if you can just make yourself the primary, so we can see you as pinned to the first screen, and then change the view from gallery to speaker, that would be awesome. Um, looks all right, awesome. So, yeah, I think a good place to go from this is so, as you made the transition out, let's go back to that moment, okay? And you made a decision like I did that, you had been part of active duty, it was time to move on. When you went into the civilian world, what do you think were the things that you said, hey, I overestimated my ability to assimilate here? And then conversely, what's the other side of that? What are the things that, I really underestimated, but I actually had I know a lot of that is what became bulletproof selling, but, so what are, if there's some people listening in now or some, active duty military members that are thinking, yeah, I'm coming out and this is going to definitely translate. And you're like, that didn't transfer. Is there anything like that you were thinking of? Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that really narrows it down and talks a lot about like, the mindset when we go into an organization. And one of our past speakers had said, one of the challenges, we're expected to know a lot about our job when we get there. Sales is one of those interesting ones where, you're almost, yes, you're hired because you have the ability to learn to do the job, but nobody knows how to sell that product until they get in there and understand the ins and outs of it. So, it's a really, learning to apply that philosophy of, you know, taking from point A to point B. How do I, take what I know and apply it, but not in a way, how do you deal with that negative assimilation that you talked about? So, hey, don't rock the boat, Shawn. Don't be such a high performer, in a way that, again, when you have the UCMJ and rank structure, it's pretty easy to know where you stand. It's really hard in the civilian world. So, have you seen people struggle with that aspect? No, I appreciate that, Shawn. That's a really good background on that. So let's open it up to some of the guys and girls on the on here, and if you want to introduce yourselves to Shawn. Shawn, thanks for coming in. So let's see if I can see hands here. If I can't, you guys can just unmute yourselves as well, which is also a great way to do things. All right. Who do we got? Anybody? You want to introduce yourselves to Shawn? Shawn, thanks for coming in. So let's see if I can see. Yeah, good. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. So, I'm actually figuring out how to use this thing as we go. So, anybody that's listening in on LinkedIn, this is not Shawn's fault. This is Raleigh's fault trying to figure out how to use Ecamm Live, which has been generous enough to give us a 14-day free trial. So, you guys, thanks for joining in and thanks for everything you're doing. So, I love what you're talking about. And I promise you guys, I do not rehearse these lunch and learn speakers to say certain things. And what I was teaching them today is, so they're on the phone for the first time. So we're using, oh yeah. So they're using Connect and Sell. They're doing, research, and we've got, leads in HubSpot, and they're calling, and they're hitting those objections, and they're starting to realize that, like, when you're first calling in a prospect, it's a business call. We're not calling, we're not selling insurance. I'm not trying to interrupt you during dinner. They're expecting your call, and they're in a way paid to get your call because they're purchasing the product. And you need to learn how to sell time. The objection is not, I'm not going to be able, you're not going to be able to sell bulletproof selling to a CEO in 6 seconds he's going to give you. You have to be able to deflect that conversation to turn it into a conversation. So it's not just like, hey, how are you? No, fine, I'm just looking. Have you seen, and I love your use of acronyms. What did you feel was something that you used in the military that you learned to do that as a combat journalist that you were able to apply to your business to get and open people up for conversations? Yeah, one of the things that we talk about quite often, and I say, is that there's no sale until you hear no. And the no is not always a no forever. It's just a no, I don't have enough information usually. And so I love that idea. And sometimes for those of us that are a little bit more, combat oriented or fight oriented, to say like, hey, once they say no, it's essentially somebody's going to win that battle. Anybody that has a 2-year old in their life, like somebody's going to win this conversation, you or the prospect. And it's either going to be they're going to give you the time and they're going to actually benefit from it because they're going to give you the time. They're going to learn something they didn't already know. That's why you're calling, right? You're not just calling because you want to bother them, unless you are, and then you're a jerk, and please stop doing that. But the other side of that is who's going to win, a professional salesperson or a professional no giver? And it's like, I'm not going to be outsold by a non professional. I have done my due diligence. I called in. I have done the work to find out you are likely the person. So I loved what you just said, like, hey, I'm not even sure I have the right person. What a great way to open this up. Hey, look, I'm not even sure I have the right person. Do you have 27 seconds to have a discussion about why I'm calling and to see if you're the right person versus maybe just what's become almost ubiquitous. Hey, do you have 26 seconds for me to explain why I'm calling? No, click. But it's like, I'm not sure I got the right person. I loved that. That's one little line. It's a little phrase, but it's something that we did in the military. There's a question. Go ahead. No, no, go ahead. Go ahead. You were going to say you're going to build on that, but mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I love that. So we got a couple questions coming in. And so we got Bernard, if you want to go ahead, and then I'll read the one that's in the chat here as well if you want to look at well, Sean. So Yeah, it's a really good point, Shawn. And when we, as I started Sales Platoon, it was an idea that became, it was a passion that became an idea, and an idea that became a company. And it really is this one of the things I was talking this morning with a friend of mine. He's a serial entrepreneur, started a bunch of different companies, not all around cereal. But he, so he was, but he is, we were talking about this. What is Sales Platoon essentially doing? And one of those things is helping people discover their passion. And I know that sounds corny, right? But again, I guess sometimes I'm a speaker, so you get that too. But it really is about understanding that like sales is a vehicle for your life. It's like, if you're a person that likes to give a lot, how are you going to give a lot if you don't have a lot to give? And so if earning high is important to you because you want to be able to donate most of it, great. You have the ability to do that. But sales, as we explain it, is essentially you're an unpaid consultant that shows up unannounced at a door of a business to help it run more efficiently or more profitably than it did before you got there. Now they don't know you're coming, and you're not necessarily sure that you're going to be able to help, but you've done your due diligence. And so learning to do that and stay motivated, I think there's a strange correlation. I was talking to Jocko from not from Extreme Ownership, but from Winning by Design. And so he was, pretty interesting. He challenged me. I used to say, God, I love hiring athletes and military because what they did prepares you for sales. And he said, no, that's actually not true. And he's not afraid to hurt your feelings, and he's got a great accent to do it in. And so I said, what do you mean? He said, well, they're not a good fit because in the military and sports, you practice 90% of the time for 10% activity. And in sales, it's 90% action, and you'd be lucky if you have 10% time once you're in your field to actually practice and get better. And it goes into that idea of, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect. As they, this is a unique time in their development, and I loved your chart. It was so good, and you're in a unique time when you're early in your sales career where you're a sponge. You're like a 3-year-old. You can learn everything. But then what happens is we get stuck and we keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting a better result. And the reality is it has a law of diminishing returns. What have you seen the best companies, people, managers, and this kind of touches on Jason's question as well. How do you constantly reevaluate and reinvigorate your skill set in a way that if you're going to be a professional salesperson, you don't end up selling Betamax videos, to a world that's streaming? Shawn, I really appreciate it. We're as always we run out of time on these things, so we're at the top of the hour. I think I just the last 20 minutes figured out how to use this thing somewhat, nowhere near as good as you, but really grateful to have you here, guys. I know there were some other questions, some of the chat. If you guys are interested, I can give you Shawn's email if he's okay with that. You guys can reach out directly to him as well. Obviously, a wealth of information. If you guys, if it's somebody's listening in, of course there are, it's LinkedIn, so somebody's listening and critiquing, tell me I'm doing a terrible job. But what's not doing a terrible job is Shawn Rhodes at Bulletproof Selling. And so, we're solving two ends of the continuum here. On one side, we have, I've got a sales team, I've got a sales process, I'm looking at how do I improve it. Shawn has a really structured program in order to do that. Our side is solving the human capital side of that. How do I find a group of determined, resourceful, you know, idealistic individuals who are driven to succeed and that also have training in sales? Well, that's why we started Sales Platoon. So, hopefully a good 1-2 punch. But a couple of things. Lonnie is our chief photographer. So we will get everybody to look pretty for the camera. If you can't look pretty, put a picture up. That's what I always say. So there we go. I got Tika back on. It's always good to have there. But we'll count down. Tell us when you're ready for us, Lonnie. We'll take our picture, which we use for all kinds of nefarious purposes. So great. All right. Well, I think that takes us to the end of our time here. So yeah, I think we're going to finish up on there. So we're gonna